So, how's it been?
Yeah, pretty good. I continue to, last time we talked about the second part of dependent origination, right? With looking at desire and the part where the I comes in, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I continue to look out for that, and also look for that in my meditation sessions. And yeah, it's quite interesting how how quick this sense of I slips into everything. Like sometimes I can watch a few things without, and I can watch so sharply and with so much mindfulness that the I doesn't slip in, and then half a second later there's another sound or another feeling, and then the eyes there again. So it was quite interesting.
I have to congratulate you. That's really good. That's the intention of doing this practice, is beginning to see that I sometimes I'm there and sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
That the I is temporary, is not a permanent, long-lasting thing.
Mm.
One of the examples that I would give for that is like in the old days with film movies with the projector, that they would have one still frame after another after another. Modern digital video has remnants of that because they still have one frame at a time, and their one frame, then they'll scan it, and then they'll have another frame, and then they'll scan it. Okay. Right. In the old days, though, the film projectors had a mechanism that looked very much like the blades of a fan in front, because the light was an arc light. You know, in World War II, they had arc lights so that they could see. Very, very powerful, used a lot of electricity, but it also had to have a motor that would bring the carbon rods closer and closer together, because as they were burning, it would melt away, and so it would constantly have to put it there. Very bright light. So when the frame is showing, the light is there, and then the fan will come and block it, and that's when you hear that's the chattering sound that will then move that frame. And then the light will be shown again for the next one. And then, so basically what's happened is, when you're watching a movie in the old ways, the movie was only being shown half the time. And half the time the screen was completely black. But very few people would notice that. That in fact, in the really, really old films, say 100 years ago, 1910, even some films today, they'll run at a lower frame rate, say 10 frames a second. At 10 frames a second, you can really see things, especially smoke or other things that have fast-moving qualities. You can see the jerkiness of it when you only have, that's why they called them flicks, by the way, is because they would flicker. So they went to 24 frames a second, because at 24 frames a second, the flickering tends to disappear. In modern times, with the digital age, we've gone to 30 frames a second, and also because the old frame that we have just finished is still reminiscent on the screen while we're painting the new one on it, there's even less of a flicker. But in the old days, you had to actually stop the light and move to the next one, and then show the light, and then stop the light, and then move the next one over. Guess what? Your brain works just like that. Consciousness turns on and off on a regular basis, and yet we think it's smooth. Also, the self is like that. And we think of this there all the time, where in fact, oh no, the self is not there. And when the self is not there, we don't know that the self is not there. But when it is there, we know it, and we think it's there all the time. That's a really important quality, is to recognize neither consciousness nor the self is steady state. that when we talk about it in a stream, it really doesn't stream. It's much more like raindrops, individual drops or individual frames or individual quantums. And there's little quantums of self that come in. But it's not a really big, solid thing. And you're seeing that. You're beginning to see the arising and the passing away of the self. And so I congratulate you strongly on being able to see that. We can also see the same thing happens with feelings. That we kind of think that there's like a feeling machine, and it points that I like it, and then it points that I don't like it, and then it points that I don't know, and then it points that I like it, I don't like it, I don't know. Actually, no, that's not the same. That's not really what happens. If you think about it more like chemicals in the brain, then sometimes it will put out this chemical, sometimes it'll put out that chemical, and sometimes it'll put out both chemicals. I like it and I don't like it, which means I'm confused. I don't know. And so, in that regard, that's not steady either. That it's intermittent. It comes and it goes, it arises and it passes away. Basically, the engine that starts that is consciousness. When we become conscious of something, then we perceive it. So on the outside world, the real reality that's out there is not what we react to. We react to an internal version of it that we created on the inside. We kind of call it realization. When I realized what happened, I said this, okay? But we don't realize what happened. We mentalize what happened. We call it realization. Here's an example of that. I just realized a bottle of beer. Wait a minute, I didn't realize it at all. I mentalized it. There's no beer. I did not realize a bottle of beer is not there. It didn't become real. Okay? In that regard, we say that we realize things where in fact we don't. The whole way of using the word I realized what you were saying is a fallacy, thinking that we're dealing with the real world. We're not. We're dealing with a mental world. And that the mental world is what reacts. And the way that it reacts is through feelings. Okay, so now it's time to start into the earlier parts of Paticca Samuppada, the first half of it. Okay?
I'm curious.
And so, now in the classical Buddhist scriptures, sometime along the way, in the very, very early days, in the early scriptures, you can see only bits and pieces of the Paticca Samuppada being talked about. But it's talking about it in the right way, in the right regard, and all of that. But it was only later, much later, when all 12 steps of the thing were put together. It's kind of a later addition. Now, in the Pali, it goes Ajiva, Sankara, Sanya, Vinaya, Namarupa, Salayatana, Pasa, and Pasa is the contact, and then the Vedana of the feelings. And so these things are there, and they need to be looked at because there's a basic problem with the understanding. And the basic problem of understanding is between number 2 and number 3 on that list. Okay? This is how it starts in English. It starts out, with ignorance as a foundation, things are put together. Okay? The things that are put together are all of your language, the body, everything that's happened to you up until this past second ago. Okay, and now the next second is added to that whole conglomeration. So it's constantly being added to, and this is what's called Sankara, which can be basically thought of as a pile of stuff that is you, all of your past. Okay? For instance, an athlete will have
memories and stuff like this is the past. Right?
I'm about to go all into that, exactly. So there's actually 3 different kinds of them. One is bodily sankara. An example of bodily sankara would be an athlete, let's say a golfer. He has bodily sankara that a non-golfer doesn't have because his body has learned particular postures and things. The same thing as a musician. But a drummer will learn a different kind of musical sankara than a violinist. but both of them learn their music right down into the fingers, right down into the hands. All right? The hands have memory. The body has memory systems built
Yeah.
into it. Uh, we can, in fact, possibly the best way to see that is in the situation, let us say that you're in a piano bar and the musician, the piano player, has a repertoire of, say, 100, maybe 200 songs, and he plays them over and over again, and he plays the songs because of the request of the audience. And so he knows that audience that goes to that bar. And now tonight, a young woman who hasn't been to the bar before comes up and leans over the piano. The piano player is going to start paying close attention to her, but he's not going to miss a note. She's going to talk to him, and he's going to answer her, and they're going to have a real conversation, and he does not miss a note on the piano. How can that be? The answer is because the body itself and a deeper part of the mind is actually playing the music, while his conscious frontal lobe is paying attention to the girl. This shows that the human mind is actually quite complex. Okay, and this is one of them is the body. The body has sankharas. It has memories. It's got functions. It's got capabilities built into it. Another example of that is on Saturday Night Live. I saw this on YouTube that they had a set of skits to where while they were talking to people, they would throw a plastic fish at their guest. And on one particular one, they had a football player, and they threw that fish at him from a obtuse angle that was really out of eye shot. And he grabbed that fish right out of the air without even turning his head to look at it, to see that it was coming. Okay? That's the sankhara, a bodily sankhara that he had developed through playing sports.
Yeah.
All right? The second kind of sankhara is the one that we're more familiar with, and that's the sankhara that is called verbal sankhara, and it's basically the way that we think. When we think in words, we're using the verbal sankhara. I'm using verbal sankhara now to teach you the Dhamma. Okay? There is another third kind of sankhara that's the real interesting one, and that is the one that is called the mental sankhara, but really in the Thai version of the sutras, they translate that as jaya, or heart. And that's more correct, because in fact it's the feeling. The feelings have sankharas. We have mental feelings, memories. And so, and oh, well, you've got a new shirt, Mickey Mouse. I know that one. No, that's Minnie Mouse. Okay. Kitty's showing me new clothes. So this feeling sankhara means that when a certain event happened that's happened similar to an event in the past, we will feel now the way that we felt in the past because we remember how to feel. We remember how to react. We remember how to respond. Okay? So we put these three things together, and that's the sum total of our past. Okay? Now, part of the body is also going to be the senses. This is where a lot of people get confused. Is the eye is actually part of the body. It's part of the sankhara, which means that we can train the eyes to see things that other people cannot see. You can have two people looking at exactly the same thing, and one guy sees things that the other guy doesn't have because he isn't trained to use his eyes that way. Okay, so you can see that, all right? The same thing is true with all of our senses. This is an important point to remember that the senses are part of the bodily sankhara. So these are the first two things. The first one and the most foundational one is that this stuff is built in ignorance. It's not built in wisdom. No child is born wise. So all of the habits that a child picks up, they pick up ignorantly. Okay, one of the things that we pick up ignorantly is selfishness when we're children. We pick it up because we see adults behaving selfishly, and we have the natural tendency from the self-preservation instinct to be selfish. So we start becoming selfish ignorantly when we're children. Therefore, when we're adults, the same stimulus will bring on the same response. Often, this is Ferdinand, and this is Kitty. Can you say hello, Ferdinand? Well, you got to put the hands up so that you can see them. You see the picture? Ah, there you go.
Hello.
Okay, so with these sankharas and with these sense organs already in place, let's say that we're going to change the frame of reference of time from the past into this present moment. In this present moment, the eye sees an object. The object and the eye meeting is called a kind of a contact. And the meeting of that kind of contact is called in English language sight. Seeing. With the ears it's called hearing. Okay, hearing is different than the sound. Sounds can happen. It takes an ear to have hearing.
Right.